I'll start by Sam's landing page. So the first thing I noticed about his landing page is that the information is well structured. Okay, so you have the logo on top. You have this section which appeals. It's kind of an appeal to action to start a new plan. That's good. You have all the information organized in these different sections, which are separated by these lines, which is good. The icons are nice. The plans, everything very organized. So I have nothing to say about the content. About the form, the first thing I noticed was the colors were not very consistent in graphic design, especially if you are designing a brand. You want your brand to be consistent with the same colors, with the same color palette. So if this was my brand, I would start to choose maybe one main color and one secondary color, maybe, and I would use those colors to color all these different elements, including my logo. Because you have here, it seems like your brand has yellow and this grayish purple color, but you also have this very saturated blue for the buttons. You have this faded yellow in these sections, also this green on these screens. So I would stick with maybe 2 or 3 colors, and I would use them consistently in your brand. Also, I feel like this yellow and this faded grayish color, it reminds me of Web.0 design, where everything was like a mix of, let me see.
In the meantime, João, can you click on hide ocultar when it says in the bottom? In the office está a partilhar o seu ecrã. It's just like bothering me.
Ocultar?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you see at some Web 1.0 designs, you'll see that there's always these elements of grayish colors, and and often these grayish colors would be mixed with more intense colors. So that gave me those vibes. That's okay if like, for example, you would see all these grays with then these blues and yellows. So it gave me kind of that vibe. That's okay if that's intentional. Okay. But all those things are things that you should be mindful about, because people might perceive them as old fashioned, for example. About the logo, that is something that caught my eye, because a good logo, it's actually quite a technical thing. Do you still hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I can still hear you.
I think Louisa joined. That's why you heard this little bloop.
Okay. So maybe I'll pause for a little bit to wait for Louise.
She's here now.
Hey, Louise.
Oh, hi. Sorry for the delay.
That's okay. I was about to start talking a little bit about logo design and commenting on Sam's logo. So can you see my shared screen?
I see myself and all the others on the shared screen.
Okay, yes, yeah. Can you enlarge it a little bit? I'll open my Photoshop to make it less confusing, okay? Okay, while I am on Photoshop, I cannot see your faces, so if you can give me some feedback that you are still listening to me, Sam, okay, or...
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, I'm typing at the same time, just taking these notes, so I'm on mute just so I don't cause too much noise. But yeah, this is great so far.
Yeah, sure. That's fine. Your typing actually gives me some feedback that you are still here.
I can give you claps if you want sometimes.
Okay.
Oh yeah, we'll go for the claps. Yeah.
Okay, so I was talking about logo design. So what I was saying is a logo is actually a very technical thing. A good logo is a logo that follows some parameters. So a good logo has to be intemporal. So it has to work now, but it will have to work in 100 years in the future. And one thing I noticed, for example, is around in 2010, there was a trend for vintage design, and I noticed that so many logos had these vintage trends in them. Like many people use these sort of arrows and all these graphic elements of this vintage design trend. Many people use mustaches and on their logos and things like that. And all those logos are really outdated now, 10 years later. So that's not, you should do a design that is appealing for the current trend, but it also must be intemporal, so it has to work even if the trend finishes. And so the logo has to be intemporal. The logo should work with one color, and the reason this is imagine that you want to make a stamp. For example, there are many applications that only use one color, but a stamp is a good example. Imagine you want to have a stamp in your office and you want to stamp your logo with one color. The logo should be able to work with that stamp. So this logo, the Sam's logo, doesn't really work with one color because it has overlapping rectangles with different colors. So that's one thing that could be improved. A logo has to be scalable. So your logo should be scalable, ideally to a point where it works as a favicon, or it works just with for a pin for your shirt, or if you want to stamp it in a pen for merchandising. It has to work in a really small scale, so it has to be very simple. This logo also it's not very scalable because the text is included in the graphics. So every time you scale the logo, the text will probably be unreadable. So that's another one. And the logo also has to be unique enough. And by unique enough, what I'm saying is just try to avoid cliches, and that's probably enough. So if your logo checks on all these criteria, you have a good logo. Everything else is just personal taste. Okay, so if your logo isn't intemporal, if your logo it's not based on cliches, if your logo is scalable, and if your logo works with one color, you probably have a good logo. And sometimes you notice that there's people tend to, for example, when they have, do you still hear me?
Yeah, that's why I sent the thumbs up.
Okay, but I can't see the thumbs up
Okay, sorry then.
because I'm in
Yeah,
Photoshop. That's why
still here,
I just need some sound
So,
because
you want us to have the mics open and do our and stuff like that?
yes, just
Okay.
yeah, okay, I'm here, I'm following, just so I can have some feedback. So I don't know if my internet is
Wonderful.
okay. So you see some layman people who are not very experienced in design do things like, for example, they have a restaurant that sells pizza, or a shop who sells electronics, and they will use that in their logo. They want to show what they are selling in their logo. That's the first intuition people have. And I've had countless clients who get, when I propose them a more abstract logo or something like that, they would say, well, people will not understand what I'm selling by that logo. I want to make that more clear. But that's not the point of the logo, because if you do that with your logo, what you are going to do is a cliche logo. Because there's tons of pizza restaurants who use like an oven or a pizza slice for their logo type, and that's what you don't want to do, because the point of the logo is to make your brand identifiable very fast, and to make your brand memorable with only one simple graphic. And you will not be able to do that if you are going to use a cliched logo that resembles all your competition's logos. So those are the four criteria for a good logo. Everything else is just personal taste. Okay, so I think this logo has margin for improvement. You could make it more scalable. You could make it work with one color. and maybe you could give it a more unique feel. I think that's debatable, and you could argue that this logo is unique enough. But I think you could improve it a little bit there also. Then so I'm going to reveal by sections some suggestions for improvement. Okay, so this is the one of the possible solutions. What I did here was just simply transform these overlapping rectangles into a more scalable icon that would work with one color. This is probably, I would say, this is not probably unique enough. It could work. Um, it could also be improved, but this is an example of these design principles applied to a more modern and functional logo. Okay, so
May
now
I
you have,
ask a question, Jean?
yeah.
When you say it has to work with one color, so I
Mhm.
understand that you have to be able to identify the logo if it's just one color, like in the stamp
Mhm.
example. But could Sam use the two squares that you have used here still in the two colors that he has on his website too?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I
Okay.
mean by that is
Thank you.
you can use whatever colors you want for your logo
Yeah.
and mix more than one color. What I'm saying is your logo must has to be able to be reproduced with one color.
Yeah.
So if you have elements that sometimes you see, like imagine a logo made with a rainbow, that's not reproducible with one color, because what you would have, you would only have one thick band
Sure.
in black, for example.
Yeah.
That doesn't really work. What you have to do is to have some elements that do not overlap in the different colors. So it's reproducible with a stamp, for example. This is just to give your logo all the possible versatility and be able to be reproduced in all possible
Yeah.
medias. Just a second now. Tô aqui no workshop. Okay. Espera aí só para curtinho. Obrigado. Okay, so the next section.
I also have a question, João, if you don't
Sim.
mind.
Yes.
How do you know? Because one of the rules is to be like the logo needs to be eternal. Like, how do you know if this in 20 years will still be, a good logo? Let's say.
You don't know. You don't know exactly, but if your logo is not following the trend of the moment, if it's a very simple logo with a very simple shape, for example, this one eye logo I did here, I think it's likely that this will work as a logo, because the principles for a good logo don't change in time. Okay, if your
Okay.
logo is still reproducible with one color, if it is still scalable, and if it's still unique enough. Oh, there's also another property, which is appropriateness. Like you would not want to use like a logo with Times New Roman, for example, for a kindergarten or something like that, or use like a logo with Comic Sans as a lettering for an institutional company, like or a financial company. um that's really not very objective, I know, because there's space here for people to discuss what is
Exactly.
appropriate or not. But I feel like most people, even laymen in design, have an intuition that Comic Sans should not be used for a financial company or something like that.
When should Comic Sense be used, right? I mean, now that
Yeah,
it was.
probably never, because it's a cliche font, so it makes your logo not look unique. But I would argue that something like Comic Sans would be appropriate for a kindergarten, for example, or something like for a store who
Okay.
sells baby products or
I
things like that.
saw on TV there is a show. It's by Jan Böhmermann. So he's a comedian, and he did research on German police,
Hmm.
and they use in their footer of their email Comic Sans.
Hmm. Yeah, that's pretty bad. Yeah, that's not
No.
appropriate at all. So yeah, but answering Tiago again, if your logo still this if these principles still apply to your logo, if these principles apply to your logo now, they will apply in 100 years. So I would argue that your logo will still work as a logo in 100 years, like the scalability, the reproducibility with one color, the uniqueness. You could argue that, well, maybe it will become a cliche in the future, and that's possible. That's a possible scenario, and that's why companies sometimes they update their logos. But I think your logo should be designed in a way that's more as resistant as possible to those changes. Okay, so you have done this section.
I have a question. Yeah,
Sure.
just one question. You don't see our interactions. What do you mean by scalable?
Yeah, by
Exactly.
scalable is, so for example, if you would use this original logo and you would put it in a very small scale, for example, stamp it, if you want to stamp it in a pen, for example, to make merchandising, or if you want to put it really small to use it as a favicon for your web page, this logo will probably not work because all this text will be very small and unreadable. So by scalable, what I mean is try to make a logo that is simple enough. So if you put it really small, for example, you can still see the shapes, you can still recognize the logo. Okay. Or or for example, another example is make it scalable enough that you could use it as an app icon. This logo would be kind of hard to fit in a app icon.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Okay, so in this next section, what I would do is like the hierarchy is pretty much respected in Sam's design. Okay, so you want to put emphasis on the button get started for free. You want to put an emphasis on this title, of course. But I feel like there are some elements here that distract from the main focus. So the main focus should be get started for free. Like these compare plans could be more, could be less noticeable. Maybe you could put the login in the top of the page right here, and have all this section dedicated to that call for action. So I put the logo, the login here, at the top also. Maybe you could just use a login / sign up. You don't really need this sentence. You could make it this even simpler, more cleaner. So this is one example of how I would do it. So I would get rid of this compare plans button because it seems like it's competing with the main button, and I would put it below it in maybe a smaller font. I would replace all these images because all these images are pretty much saying the same thing. Maybe you could use a more modern image with better photography that would just, where executive people would show up without having so many repetitive photos. So there are plenty of stock images that you could use for this purpose, and maybe put this a little bit further away from the main focus. So which principles are we using here? We are using proximity, like you have these design principles. You are using hierarchy because you are putting more emphasis on your get start for free. That's your main focus. You could even put this button a little bit larger if you want, but I feel like this is quite balanced as it is. Proximity, just put a little farther away what you don't want so much. So you have also the proximity, and you have the balance, and the balance is really putting your you also have hierarchy because you have this title a little bit larger, etc., etc. And balance, you have to keep like balance. You can get balance by putting these margins from, for example, the margin from this tagline. It's pretty much the same from this title then and for this button. So this is how you kind of apply these principles. you have this next section. And now for this next section, I would do it in a way that you would not require these lines, because to me all these lines introduce noise. You have this faded yellow background, which is good to highlight this section and to highlight this information. But if you have all this color behind this section, you don't really need these lines to separate it, because the color already gives that separation. It seems to me that these elements are a little bit redundant. Okay. So what I would do is I would put this section with one color. Okay. And I would also put a color that contrasts with the next section to highlight it even more.
This is awesome. I can't help but smile just looking at what you've managed to knock up in however, in a short amount of time. Just voila, and it looks so much better.
And
Obviously, you know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So the way you're revealing this to us is really cool.
This is cool.
Okay, thank. I'm glad it's useful for you. Okay, so what I did is apply the same principles. I would just, so the first thing I would put this tagline inside the section, because it's not related to the previous section. So I would put, first of all, the title of that section first, how it works, and then I would put this introduction tagline, and this is more like a personal choice.
I lost
I would.
sound. Could just be me.
Sorry.
I think this was not for you.
Oh, okay. So this is more like a personal choice. I put these images in a round shape. I just think it looks better. It makes the design breathe a little bit more. So if they are squared, they would be more close together. You can put the same information in less area, so it allows it for a more breathableness. And
Okay, João, but I have a question here as well.
Yes.
So, and this happens already with us a lot of times, which is, so you we're looking to Sam's design, and you said, which makes sense. Like, there's no need for having those boundaries, those lines, because you already have different colors. So I was expecting that you would like just remove it, but you'd like completely redesign everything. So now there's a different color. The images are circled.
Yes, the thing here is, you like the first thing that I would say, that the first basic principle in design, which designers talk a lot, and I've sent you some examples through WhatsApp, is apply grid systems. But sometimes that can sound a little bit abstract. People don't understand what does it mean to apply grid systems. But what it really is think of your design in sections. So in this website, you have this first header. Okay, so in this header, I have this space. What should I put in this space? Well, maybe a login, something that it's not very important to convey the message, something that's more an obligation, something that you have to put it there, but as discreetly as possible. And you have the logo, then you have this next section. Okay, this next section is important. It's a call to action. I don't need to put a lot of things there. What do I need to call people for action? Well, I need a button. I need a good title and maybe a good image. How do I put that together? Well, a good image, I will search for a good image. The title, I'll put it a little bit bigger. And to put emphasis on my button, I will put only one button. Okay, so these are just you instead of trying to go to try to design the page at once, just think about these little challenges and think about by sections. So in these sections, when you get to this second section, the first question that comes to my mind is, okay, so I have a second section. How do I make it in a way that people perceive it as a second section without being too confusing, or without merging with the adjacent sections? Well, maybe I'll put a background only for this section. Okay, so let's put it a background. If I put a background, do I really need these lines? Can I what these lines are doing and what is faded yellow is doing, which is make this section, is I like this section. do I really need all these elements? Can I do it with only one element to make my, because the thing here is, if you, people will perceive if you are confident with your design, and people will perceive it if it was done by an amateur or a professional. Be- People will read all these cues, right? They, okay, why it might not be a conscious thing, but they will understand that, well, maybe there's not much confidence in this design. So this is how I would do it. Only one solution for each problem. So I put these rounded images. It could have worked with squared images. Okay, I just felt like this would work a little bit better because they allow for this section to breathe more. Um, and then I would put the button just in the same shape as the pictures. Which design principle is this? This is um, repetition, pretty much. You have a pattern, and you have a pattern, 1 2 3, and you just keep that pattern. Well, why not putting that button just the same as the picture? These are all intuitions that you will acquire with experience. Okay, so next section is, it's fine. There is not really much to do here. The next section is also fine. The only thing here, I would do is, if we got rid of these lines, how could we, for consistency, how could we apply the same principle for this section? Well, just put some background color. If you don't want to, maybe it would, you might need the blue to highlight, for example, this standard title here, this standard tab. And if you would put the blue background color, you could not see the tab. You could use another secondary color. So if you have a brand color palette, you could use those secondary colors. But maybe just a simple neutral light gray would do the trick. And since you have already put that background in that section, you don't need this faded color to highlight this section, because these different background colors already do that work.
Yeah, that's good.
So this is the final result. I think it looks more professional, it looks cleaner. I also opted for this blue because it seems to me, first of all, this blue works perfectly well with this green. Okay, and also which this green could be a secondary color for your brand palette. And I just also felt like, I feel like most people have an intuition for what colors represent. So most people will have an understanding that yellow conveys like happiness or energy, um, while like a dark blue, for example, conveys more sobriety, for example. So I opted for this dark blue because I felt like this is an app that more sober, let's say, companies would be interested in, bigger companies, and I think it suits the product. Okay, but you could make a brand palette where you would mix this darker blue with a more with a more vivid green to make it less serious, or to put some hints of modernity there. But I feel like,
João,
yes,
for this palette color palette thing, since we are all not professionals, I think there are websites where you can see colors that
sure, yeah.
combine with each other. Do you recommend using this?
You have all these tools. So
Yeah.
you have these color palette generators.
Yeah.
You can also upload the photo, and this will extract the colors from the photo.
Nice.
But the thing here, the idea is to be criterious when using your color. So most brands have a primary color,
Mm-hmm.
a color that they will use for their logos and for the most important graphic elements. And then they will use secondary colors and more colors if they want to use, for example, illustrations where adding more colors are needed. they will stick to that color palette. But the thing is, the most important thing is to use appropriate colors for what you are trying to convey.
Yeah.
So if you have a very, like, if you have a modern product, if you are launching a very high-tech app or something like that, maybe it's appropriate to use more neon saturated colors. If you have a financial company, maybe use more sober colors. And then you can play with this. Maybe you have a financial company, which the main value is sobriety, but you also have very young people in there working in there, and you want to add a touch of youthfulness. Maybe you want to add a secondary color which is more saturated, for example. So these color palettes that these sites generate might not be the ideal color palettes for your brand. So, but this gives you some examples. So, for example, you have this color palette that this site has generated. This color palette seems to me like maybe a campfire tours, or like nature walks, or maybe mountain biking, because it has the browns which convey like the earth, and the greens which convey the nature, the blues, the water. Maybe, but you could use this color palette, and let's say you would use, okay, I will not use the yellow and the brown. I would use these three colors for my financial company, for example. And to make them more sober, I would reduce the saturation, make this blue my main color, make it more darker. And so you can adapt these color palettes to better fit your brand, and still give some, and still be useful, to generate this palette.
Yeah.
So you have a starting point. Okay, so this is what I would do to Sam's design, applying these principles. Can we move to the next?
Sure.
That was awesome. I had a couple of questions, but you've answered them already. Yeah, that, as you say, that looks awesome. It looks really professional. Thanks for the tips.
Dan doesn't have any further words.
I will send you these designs if you want to use some
That'd be really
elements.
helpful. Yeah.
Okay,